Jerome Washington stood in the first-class aisle, his leather briefcase hitting the floor, 24 passengers staring. The flight attendant had just declared his ticket fraudulent. His finger scrolled across his phone screen, finding a number. One call. 3 minutes later, everything flipped upside down. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of their skin color, smash that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this story will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when this CEO makes that phone call. Now, let's rewind and see how we got here. The morning started like any victory lap should. Jerome Washington, 42 years old, CEO of Tech Vanguard, had just closed the biggest merger of his career in Atlanta. $3 billion company. Artificial intelligence for healthcare. Revolutionary technology that would save lives. And Jerome, one of the few black CEOs in the Fortune 500, had just signed a $750 million acquisition deal with a European AI firm. The contract sat in his briefcase, ink still fresh, future gleaming bright. He woke up that morning in the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton, Atlanta skyline spreading before him like a promise. The city where Martin Luther King Jr. was born. The city that knew struggle and triumph. Jerome showered, dressed in his gray Armani suit, checked his reflection. 6'2", confident stride, Apple Watch edition glinting on his wrist. His Ferragamo leather bag held his laptop, the merger documents, and a speech head written for the press conference in San Francisco. Everything was perfect. But perfection, Jerome had learned growing up in Southside Chicago, was always temporary for men who looked like him. His mother, Diane, had worked 3 jobs to keep him and his sister fed. Cleaning offices at night, serving lunch at a diner, doing laundry on weekends. Shed cried when Jerome got his full scholarship to MIT. Cried harder when he graduated top of his class. And when he founded Tech Vanguard 8 years ago, Shed framed the Forbes article about him and hung it in her living room. "My baby," Shed whispered, touching his face. "You made it. Made it." Those words echoed in Jerome's mind as he checked out of the hotel, as his driver navigated Atlanta traffic toward Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Head made it. Built a company from nothing. Employed 2,300 people. Developed AI that helped doctors detect cancer earlier, that gave patients hope. Had done it with intelligence, integrity, and relentless work. His skin color hadn't stopped him, or so he thought. The airport was busy that Tuesday morning. Business travelers rushed past, dragging suitcases, clutching coffee cups. Jerome checked in at the first-class counter, his Diamond Elite status greeting him on the screen. The agent, a young woman named Patricia, smiled professionally as she processed his boarding pass. But Jerome noticed something. A flicker in her eyes. A quick glance from his face to his suit to his bag, then back to the computer screen. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is everything all right?" Jerome asked. "Yes, sir. Everything's fine. You're in seat 2A. Boarding starts in 20 minutes." But her voice carried a note Head heard before. Doubt. Question. The silent interrogation that asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" Jerome took his boarding pass and walked toward security. Head flown first class hundreds of times. Sky United Airlines knew him well. Had given them over $200,000 in business over the past 5 years. Diamond Elite wasn't just a status. It was a relationship. Or it should have been. Security went smoothly. TSA pre-check meant no shoes off, no laptop out, just a quick scan and he was through. Jerome grabbed breakfast at a cafe near his gate, scrolled through emails on his phone, confirmed the press conference timing with his VP of Communications. The merger would be announced at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, Major media outlets were already gathering. This was going to change everything for Tech Vanguard. Position them as global leaders. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Safe travels, baby. Make me proud." Jerome smiled, typed back, "Always, Mom. Love you." Boarding began. First-class passengers were called first, and Jerome joined the line. The gate agent scanned his pass once, then twice. She frowned, scanned it again. "Is there a problem?" Jerome asked. "No, sir. Sometimes the scanner is slow. You're good to go." But the woman behind him, an older white lady with silver hair and a Chanel purse, hadn't been scanned twice. Neither had the man ahead of him, a balding executive in his 50s. Just Jerome. Just the black man in the expensive suit. He walked down the jetway, that long tunnel connecting the gate to the plane, and something tightened in his chest. Not fear, not yet, just awareness. The kind of awareness black people develop early, the radar that detects when something might go wrong. The plane door opened. The cabin smelled like leather and filtered air. Soft lighting created an amber glow. A flight attendant stood at the entrance, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, makeup perfect, smile manufactured. Her name tag read Brittany Collins. "Welcome aboard," she said, her eyes sliding over Jerome without really seeing him. "Thank you," Jerome replied, moving into the first-class cabin. 2 rows of seats, 4 across, wide leather recliners with personal screens and ample legroom. This was the space people paid premium prices for. The space where deals were made, where executives relaxed, where comfort was guaranteed. Jerome had sat here countless times. He knew which seats had the best window views, which flight attendants remembered his preference for black coffee. No sugar. He reached row 2, seat A, right side window. His seat. He lifted his briefcase into the overhead compartment, settled into the leather, buckled his seatbelt. Around him, other passengers filed in. A white man, in his 60s, expensive watch, golf tan, took seat 3C across the aisle. A woman in her 50s, lawyer type, sharp blazer, sat in 1D. Everyone else was white. Everyone else belonged, apparently, without question. Jerome opened his laptop, pulled up his speech draft. He wanted to review the statistics one more time, make sure the financial projections were clear. This merger meant jobs, meant innovation, meant saving lives. He was excited, proud, ready. That's when he heard it. A whisper from behind him, row 3. "Is he sure he's in the right seat?" Jerome's fingers paused on the keyboard. He didn't turn around. Didn't react. Just kept reading his screen, though the words blurred a little. Another voice. Quieter. Maybe he upgraded last minute. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maybe he didn't really belong in first class. Maybe head somehow snuck in. Maybe his success, his suit, his briefcase, his seat were all mistakes. Jerome closed his eyes, took a breath. Head dealt with this before. Microaggressions, they called them now. Tiny cuts that bled slow. Store clerks following him through boutiques. Colleagues assuming he was IT instead of CEO at conferences. Police officers asking for extra identification at routine traffic stops. Head learned to navigate it, to rise above it, to prove himself again and again. But today, something felt different. Today, the whispers felt louder. Brittany Collins returned, walking down the aisle, checking overhead bins. When she reached Jerome's row, she stopped. "Sir, can I see your boarding pass?" Jerome looked up. "Excuse me, your boarding pass. I need to verify your seat assignment." Around him, conversations halted. Passengers looked over. The man in 3C lowered his newspaper. "I'm in seat 2A," Jerome said calmly. "This is my assigned seat." "I understand, sir, But I need to see your boarding pass to confirm. Nobody else had been asked. Not one other passenger in first class had been required to show their boarding pass after sitting down. Just Jerome. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the paper, handed it to her. Brittany studied it, her lips pressed thin, her eyes narrowing. She looked at the seat number, looked at Jerome, looked at the boarding pass again. "One moment, sir." She walked toward the front of the cabin, boarding pass in hand, and spoke quietly to another flight attendant, a younger woman with dark hair. They both glanced back at Jerome. The dark-haired attendant shook her head, said something, gestured toward the gate. Jerome felt his pulse quicken, not with fear, with recognition. He knew what was happening, had heard the stories from other black executives, had read the articles about passengers removed from flights for no reason other than suspicion, other than disbelief that they could afford first class, other than the color of their skin. But this was him. This was now. And he was not going to accept it. Brittany Collins returned with another woman, older, more authoritative. This flight attendant was in her late 50s, with short-styled hair and a name tag that read Denise Harmon, lead flight attendant. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd worked for Sky United Airlines for decades, someone who knew the rules and enforced them without question. "Good morning, sir," Denise said, her voice professionally cool. "I understand there's a question about your seat assignment." Jerome kept his voice level. "There's no question. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. Seat 2A, first class, as confirmed by my boarding pass, which your colleague is currently holding." Denise glanced at the boarding pass in Brittany's hand, then back at Jerome. "Sir, we've had several incidents recently with fraudulent tickets. Upgraded boarding passes that weren't properly purchased. I'm sure you understand we need to verify." "Verify what, exactly?" Jerome asked. "My boarding pass is legitimate. It's printed with my name, my seat assignment, my frequent flyer number. What else do you need?" "We need to confirm payment, sir. Sometimes tickets are purchased with stolen credit cards, or points are transferred illegally. Can you show me proof of purchase?" Jerome stared at her. Around them, the cabin had gone quiet. Every passenger was listening now, watching this interaction unfold. The man in 3C, who Jerome now saw was named William Preston based on the monogrammed briefcase near his feet, leaned forward slightly, interested. "My company purchased this ticket," Jerome said. "Tech Vanguard Corporate Travel. The same company that's purchased hundreds of my tickets over the past 5 years. The same airline I have Diamond Elite status with. You can verify this in your system." "We're trying to do that, sir," Denise replied. "But the system is showing some irregularities. Until we can confirm, I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy class temporarily." The words landed like a slap. Move to economy. Temporarily. As if Jerome were a suspect, a criminal, someone whose word couldn't be trusted. "I'm not moving," Jerome said quietly. Denise's expression hardened. "Sir, if you don't cooperate, you'll have to call airport security." "Call them," Jerome said. "Because I'm not moving from my assigned seat until you can explain to me why I'm being singled out. Why you didn't ask anyone else in this cabin to verify their payment. Why you're treating me like I don't belong here." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The question hung in the air, and everyone knew the answer. Everyone saw it. The only difference between Jerome and every other passenger in first class was the color of his skin. William Preston cleared his throat. "Excuse me, but we're supposed to depart in 10 minutes. If there's a problem with this gentleman's ticket, perhaps he should just move so the rest of us aren't delayed." The woman in 1D, Martha Hendricks, nodded. "I have a connection in San Francisco. I can't miss it because of this," Brittany whispered to Denise. And Jerome caught the words, "Maybe we should just call security now." His hands, resting on the armrests, clenched slightly. Years of experience had taught him how to navigate spaces where he wasn't wanted. Boardrooms where he was the only black face. Investor meetings where people assumed he was the assistant, not the CEO. Had learned to smile, to be twice as prepared, to prove himself constantly. But today, something in him resisted. Today, in this first-class cabin, with 24 pairs of eyes judging him, Jerome Washington decided he was done proving himself to people who'd already decided he didn't belong. "I'm calling ground services to verify," Denise said, pulling out a radio. She spoke into it, requested a supervisor check the ticketing system for Seat 2A, Flight SU 447 to San Francisco. The wait was excruciating. 2 minutes that felt like 20. Passengers shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. A baby cried in economy behind the curtain. Brittany stood near the cockpit, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact with Jerome. Denise held her radio, waiting for a response. William Preston muttered, "This is ridiculous." Martha Hendricks pulled out her phone, started recording. Jerome saw the red dot of video capture, saw her angle it toward him. Great. Now he was going to be on social media. Black man causing problems in first class. The narrative would write itself. The radio crackled. A voice came through, garbled. "Lead attendant. We're showing the ticket was purchased by Tech Vanguard corporate account. Diamond Elite member. Frequent flyer. Payment confirmed." Denise's jaw tightened. She'd been proven wrong. The system confirmed what Jerome had said. His ticket was legitimate. He belonged in this seat. But instead of apologizing, instead of stepping back, Denise doubled down. "Sir, even though the ticket shows as purchased, we've had issues with corporate account fraud. I'm going to need you to provide additional identification proving you work for Tech Vanguard." Jerome almost laughed. "Almost. You want me to prove I work for the company whose credit card purchased this ticket?" "Yes, sir. Company ID? Employee badge? Something that confirms your relationship to Tech Vanguard." "I'm the CEO," Jerome said. "I founded Tech Vanguard. My name is on the company registration, on every press release, on the website. Would you like me to show you Forbes articles about me? LinkedIn? My driver's license matches my boarding pass? What else do you want?" Denise hesitated. Brittany whispered again, more urgently this time. And then Jerome heard it, the words that pushed everything over the edge. "Maybe we should ask the captain to make the final decision. If this passenger is being disruptive, Captain Sullivan can refuse to fly with him on board." Disruptive. Jerome hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved from his seat, hadn't threatened anyone. All had done was refuse to accept being treated as less than. And now he was disruptive. "Fine," Denise said. "I'll get the captain." She walked toward the cockpit, knocked, disappeared inside. Brittany stayed in the aisle, her eyes everywhere except on Jerome. The other passengers whispered among themselves. Martha Hendricks continued recording, her video now several minutes long. Jerome pulled out his phone. Not to record, but to text his assistant. Delay possible. Situation on plane. Keep press conference on standby. His assistant responded immediately. "Everything okay," Jerome typed. "We'll update soon," because he didn't know yet. He didn't know if this would end with an apology, with him flying to San Francisco as planned, with life continuing normally, or if this was about to become something much bigger. Something that would test not just his patience, but his power. The cockpit door opened. A man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair, pilot's uniform crisp and decorated with stripes and pins. Captain Brett Sullivan, 51 years old, former Air Force, 28 years with Sky United Airlines. He carried himself with the authority of someone used to being in command, someone whose word was final. Behind him, Another pilot appeared briefly. Younger. Black. With concerned eyes. The co-pilot. He looked at Jerome, and something passed between them. Recognition. Solidarity. Worry. But Captain Sullivan's face showed no such empathy. He listened as Denise briefed him, her voice low but urgent. He nodded, glanced at Jerome, nodded again. Then he walked down the aisle, stopping at row 2. "Sir, I'm Captain Brett Sullivan. I understand we have a situation here." Jerome looked up at him. "The only situation is that I'm being harassed for sitting in my assigned seat. From what I'm hearing, there's a question about your ticket validity." "There's no question. Your ground services confirmed my ticket was purchased legitimately. Your lead flight attendant is choosing not to accept that confirmation." Brett's eyes narrowed. "Sir, the safety and security of this flight is my responsibility. If there's any doubt about a passenger's right to be on board, I have the authority to remove that passenger." "Doubt based on what?" Jerome asked. "Based on the fact that I'm black and sitting in first class." The words were out now. Clear, undeniable. The accusation everyone had been dancing around. Brett stiffened. "Sir, this has nothing to do with race. This is about following protocol." "Then why am I the only passenger you're following protocol with? Why didn't you verify anyone else's ticket?" "I'm not going to argue with you," Brett said. "You have two choices. You can voluntarily move to economy until we can fully verify your ticket, or you can leave the aircraft. Those are your options." Jerome felt something shift inside him, a decision crystallizing. Had spent his life being reasonable, being accommodating, being the black man who made white people comfortable. Had smiled when he wanted to shout. Had explained when he wanted to walk away. Had proved himself over and over to people who started from the assumption that he was less than. "Not today. I have a third option," Jerome said quietly. Captain Brett Sullivan crossed his arms, his posture radiating authority and impatience. Behind him, Denise Harmon waited for vindication, for this troublesome passenger to be removed so her judgment would be proven correct. Brittany Collins hovered near the galley, and the co-pilot, whose name tag read Nathaniel Hughes, stood in the cockpit doorway, his expression troubled. "A third option," Brett repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "There are no third options on my aircraft, sir. You follow instructions, or you leave. The third option," Jerome said calmly, "is that you apologize. Return to the cockpit, and we all forget this ever happened. Because what's happening right now is illegal discrimination, and it's being witnessed by everyone in this cabin." William Preston spoke up from row 3. "Captain, I don't mean to interfere, but we're already delayed. Can't we just resolve this? If the gentleman's ticket is questionable, surely moving him is the simplest solution. Those of us who paid for first class shouldn't have to endure this disruption. Those of us who paid." As if Jerome hadn't paid, as if his Diamond Elite status, his hundreds of thousands of dollars spent with Sky United Airlines, his corporate account meant nothing because his skin was brown. Martha Hendricks chimed in, still recording. "I've been filming this entire incident. For the record, I think the airline staff is just doing their job. Security is important." Jerome glanced at her phone, at the red recording dot, and shook his head. Of course, she was framing this as reasonable security measures. Of course, she couldn't see what was really happening, because it wasn't happening to her. It never would. Brett uncrossed his arms, leaned down slightly, lowered his voice so only Jerome could hear. "Sir, I'm trying to give you a way out of this that doesn't involve police. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder." Jerome's voice remained steady, but fire burned beneath the words. "Captain, I showed my boarding pass. Your ground services confirmed my ticket. I've provided my identification. I've explained that I'm the CEO of the company that purchased this ticket. What else do you want from me? A DNA test? A credit score? Permission to exist in a space I paid for? Your attitude is making this worse, Brett replied. My attitude. Jerome leaned back in his seat, looked directly at the captain. Let me explain my attitude. I grew up in Southside Chicago. My mother cleaned toilets so I could eat. I studied my way into MIT on full scholarship. I built a $3 billion company from nothing. I employ over 2,000 people. I develop technology that saves lives. And today, on this airplane, I'm being treated like a criminal because you and your flight attendant can't believe a black man belongs in first class. That's my attitude. Does it make you uncomfortable? Brett's face flushed. This is not about race. Then what's it about? Please, explain it to me. Explain it to everyone here. Why am I being singled out? Denise stepped forward. Sir, you're being disruptive. You're arguing with crew members. That alone is grounds for removal. I'm defending my right to sit in a seat I paid for. Jerome countered. If asking questions and refusing to be discriminated against is disruptive, then your definition of disruption is the problem, not my behavior. Nathaniel Hughes, the co-pilot, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. Captain, maybe we should reconsider this. The passenger has provided all necessary documentation. Brett shot him a look. I'm handling this. Nathaniel. With respect, sir, I think this situation is escalating unnecessarily. Return to the cockpit. Brett ordered. Nathaniel hesitated, his eyes meeting Jerome's for a brief moment. In that glance, Jerome saw empathy, understanding, and helplessness. Nathaniel was a black pilot in an industry that had very few. He understood exactly what was happening, but he also understood that challenging his captain could cost him his career. Nathaniel retreated, but he didn't close the cockpit door. He stood there, watching, bearing witness. Brett straightened, his decision made. Sir, you've refused to cooperate. You're being belligerent and disruptive. Under Federal Aviation Administration regulations, I have the authority to refuse transport to any passenger I deem a security risk. I'm asking you one final time. Leave this aircraft voluntarily, or I will call airport security to remove you. The cabin went silent. Even the baby in economy stopped crying. 24 passengers held their breath, watching this confrontation reach its breaking point. Jerome felt the weight of the moment. He thought about his mother, about the sacrifices she'd made. He thought about every young black professional who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Who'd swallowed their anger and moved to the back. Who'd accepted less than they deserved because fighting seemed too hard, too risky, too costly. He thought about power. Real power. Not the kind that came from a uniform or a title, but the kind that came from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Call security, Jerome said. Because I'm not moving. Denise looked triumphant. Brittany pulled out her phone, presumably to contact the gate. William Preston shook his head in disgust. Martha Hendricks zoomed in with her camera. Brett pulled out his own radio. Ground services, this is Captain Sullivan, Flight SU 447. I need airport security at Gate B-17 immediately. Passenger refusing to deplane, creating a disturbance. Copy that, Captain. Security en route. The radio clicked off. Brett stared down at Jerome. You've made your choice. No, Jerome replied. You made yours. The moment you assumed I didn't belong here. You made your choice. I'm just refusing to accept it. You'll be banned from Sky United Airlines for life, Brett warned. Maybe. Or maybe you'll wish you'd listened to your co-pilot. Brett frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Jerome didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone, unlocked it, scrolled through his contacts. His thumb hovered over a name. Gerald Whitmore, chairman of the board of directors, Sky United Airlines. Old friend from MIT. Investor in Tech Vanguard. Someone who'd known Jerome for 20 years, who'd watched him build his company, who respected his intelligence and integrity. Someone who would listen. "What are you doing?" Denise demanded. "Sir, you need to put that phone away. We're still at the gate, but phone use must be approved by the captain." "I'm making a phone call," Jerome said simply. "You can't do that," Brittany added. "Actually, I can. We're at the gate. Airplane mode isn't required until we're cleared for pushback. Federal regulations. Would you like me to quote the specific statute?" Brett's eyes narrowed. "Who are you calling?" Jerome didn't answer. He pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. "Put the phone away," Brett ordered. 3 rings. "Sir, I'm warning you." 4 rings. Then a click. A voice, warm and familiar. "Jerome? Is that you?" Jerome put the phone on speaker. "Let everyone hear. Let them all bear witness to what happened next. Gerald, it's me. I'm on Sky United Flight 447. Atlanta to San Francisco. I'm sitting in my assigned first-class seat, and your captain is threatening to have me removed by security because your flight attendant doesn't believe I belong here. Thought you should know how your airline treats its Diamond Elite members." The cabin went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Gerald Whitmore's voice came through the speaker, sharp and focused. "Say that again." "I'm being removed from first class. My ticket has been verified as legitimate. I've provided all identification. But Captain Brett Sullivan has decided I'm a security risk because I'm black and sitting in first class. I'm recording this conversation. So is another passenger. Thought you'd want to be aware." "Jerome, hold on. Don't move. Give me 3 minutes." The line didn't disconnect. Gerald kept the call active. In the background, Jerome heard him speaking to someone else, his voice urgent. Brett's face had gone pale. Denise looked confused. Brittany's hand trembled slightly. "Who is that?" Brett demanded. "The chairman of your board of directors," Jerome said calmly. "Gerald Whitmore, MIT. Class of 1984. My friend. My investor. The man who signs off on executive compensation, including yours, Captain Sullivan." William Preston put down his newspaper. Martha Hendricks stopped recording, suddenly realizing her video might have captured something she didn't want to be associated with. The mood in the cabin shifted. Uncertainty crept in. Nathaniel Hughes, still standing in the cockpit doorway, allowed himself a small smile. Brett's radio crackled. "Captain Sullivan, this is Barbara Keene, CEO of Sky United Airlines. I need to speak with you immediately." Brett's hand shook as he lifted the radio to his mouth. "This is Sullivan. Come to the phone in the cockpit. Now." Brett looked at Jerome, at Denise, at the phone still on speaker in Jerome's hand. Head made a calculation, a decision based on assumptions about power and who wielded it. Head assumed the black man in seat 2A was powerless, was someone who could be pushed around, dismissed, removed. Head assumed wrong. Captain Brett Sullivan walked toward the cockpit, his shoulders stiff, his confidence cracking like ice on a warming lake. Denise Harmon remained in the aisle, her face cycling through confusion, worry, and the dawning realization that she might have made a catastrophic error. Brittany Collins had backed up toward the galley, practically pressing herself against the wall, as if distance might protect her from what was unfolding. Jerome sat in seat 2, a phone still in his hand. Gerald Whitmore's voice occasionally murmuring in the background as he spoke to others in what was clearly an emergency conference. The other passengers no longer looked at Jerome with suspicion or irritation. Now they looked at him with something else. Recognition. Maybe fear. Definitely respect. William Preston had folded his newspaper entirely. No longer pretending to read, Martha Hendricks had pocketed her phone. Her recording stopped, her face flushed. She seemed to be calculating whether she should delete the video or keep it as evidence, though evidence of what she probably wasn't sure anymore. Brett disappeared into the cockpit. Through the open door, Jerome could hear the muffled sound of a phone conversation. Brett's voice rising and falling, defensive at first, then increasingly subdued. Nathaniel Hughes stepped fully into the cabin, his pilot's uniform impeccable, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes alive with something that might have been satisfaction. He walked down the aisle and stopped at Jerome's row. "Sir," he said quietly, "I want to apologize for what's happening. This is not protocol. This is not how we're supposed to treat passengers." Jerome looked up at him. "You're the co-pilot." "Yes, sir." "Nathaniel Hughes. You knew this was wrong from the start." Nathaniel glanced toward the cockpit, lowered his voice further. "I did. But challenging a captain during passenger boarding, especially in front of everyone, that's complicated. Career-ending, potentially. More career-ending than discriminating against passengers. Should be," Nathaniel said. "Doesn't always work that way." Jerome nodded slowly. He understood. Nathaniel was navigating his own minefield. A black pilot in an industry that was overwhelmingly white, working under a captain who'd just revealed himself to be either racist or incompetent, or both. Speaking up could mean being labeled difficult, insubordinate, not a team player. All the coded language used to sideline people who didn't stay quiet. "Thank you for trying," Jerome said. "For what it's worth," Nathaniel replied. "I've flown with Brett Sullivan for 2 years. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Never this blatant, but there have been incidents, comments, questions about passengers who don't look like what he thinks first class should look like. Has anyone reported him? Reports go nowhere. Has got seniority, good safety record. The company protects pilots, especially senior ones. Bad press for disciplining them." Before Jerome could respond, Brett emerged from the cockpit. His face was ashen. He held a phone in his hand, the screen still glowing, and he walked directly to Jerome's row. Behind him, Denise watched, her posture defensive, her arms crossed. Brett stopped. For a long moment, he said nothing. The entire cabin waited. Then he held out the phone. "Mr. Washington, the CEO would like to speak with you." Jerome took the phone. "This is Jerome Washington." The voice that came through was crisp, professional, and furious. "Mr. Washington, this is Barbara Keene, Chief Executive Officer of Sky United Airlines. First, let me apologize on behalf of our entire company for what you've experienced this morning. What's happened is completely unacceptable and violates every policy we have regarding passenger treatment and non-discrimination." "Appreciated," Jerome said, though more interested in action than apology. "You'll have both," Barbara replied. "I've been on the phone with Gerald Whitmore, who, as you know, is our board chairman. Has briefed me on who you are. Though frankly, that shouldn't matter. Every passenger deserves respect. But the fact that you're a Diamond Elite member, a CEO, and someone who's given us significant business makes this even more egregious." Jerome put the phone on speaker again. Let everyone hear accountability happening in real time. "Captain Sullivan," Barbara continued, her voice cutting through the cabin like a blade, "you are hereby relieved of command for this flight. First Officer Hughes will assume captain responsibilities. You are to return to Atlanta immediately after landing in San Francisco and report to HR. You are suspended pending investigation." Brett's jaw clenched. "Ma'am, with all respect, I was following security protocols." "No, Captain, you were not. I've reviewed the gate logs. Mr. Washington's ticket was verified by ground services. He provided identification. There was no legitimate security concern. What there was, apparently, was a decision by you and lead flight attendant Harmon to target a passenger based on biases that have no place in this company. Denise stepped forward. Miss Keene, I can explain. We've had issues with fraudulent tickets recently, and I was simply being cautious. Miss Harmon. Barbara's voice could have frozen water. In the past 6 months, how many first-class passengers have you asked to verify payment and provide additional identification beyond their boarding pass? Silence. I'll tell you, Barbara continued. According to our records, you've made this request 17 times. Would you like to guess how many of those 17 passengers were people of color? More silence. All 17, Barbara said. Every single one. That's not security protocol, Miss Harmon. That's racial profiling. And it ends today. You are also suspended, effective immediately. Gather your belongings and deplane. Another flight attendant will take your position for this flight. Denise's face crumpled. Brittany looked terrified, probably wondering if she was next. Mr. Washington, Barbara said, I cannot undo what's happened this morning, but I can ensure it never happens again. You have my direct number now, this phone you're holding. If you experience any further issues on this flight or any future flight, I want to hear about it immediately. Additionally, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you this week to discuss how we can improve our diversity and inclusion practices. Gerald suggested you might be willing to advise us. We need your perspective. Now, let me pause for a second and ask you something. If you were in Jerome's position, if you'd just been humiliated and discriminated against in front of 24 people, would you accept an apology and move on? Or would you push for systemic change? Comment number 1 if you think Jerome should demand more than just an apology. If you think he should use this moment to force real change at Sky United Airlines. And while you're down there, hit that like button because this story is about to get even more intense. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss what happens next when this plane finally takes off. Because Jerome's phone call didn't just save his seat, it's about to expose something much bigger. How many other passengers have been treated like this? How deep does this discrimination go? Stick around to find out. Jerome looked around the cabin. At Denise, who was crying now, her career potentially over. At Brett, whose face showed anger and humiliation. At Nathaniel, who was trying not to smile. At the other passengers, who suddenly seemed very interested in their phones, their magazines, anything but making eye contact with him. Miss Keene, Jerome said, I appreciate your swift action. And yes, I'm willing to meet and discuss how to prevent this from happening to anyone else. But I want to be clear. This isn't about me getting special treatment because I'm a CEO or because I know you're board chairman. This is about systematic change. This is about making sure the young black professional traveling on their first business trip, the family saving up for a vacation, the student coming home from college, all of them are treated with the same respect you'd give to anyone else. Agreed, Barbara said. Completely agreed. Then we'll talk soon. Jerome handed the phone back to Brett, whose hand trembled slightly as he took it. The captain, former captain now, stood there for a moment, seeming to want to say something, but what could he say? What defense could he offer? Finally, Brett turned and walked back to the cockpit to collect his belongings. Denise moved toward the front of the plane, tears streaming down her face, her fellow flight attendants avoiding her gaze. The power dynamic had completely flipped. The people who'd held all the authority minutes ago were now powerless. And the man they'd tried to remove was sitting calmly in seat 2A, exactly where he belonged. Nathaniel Hughes made an announcement over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, This is First Officer Nathaniel Hughes. I'll be your captain for today's flight to San Francisco. We apologize for the delay. We'll be pushing back shortly. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. A new lead flight attendant appeared, a black woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Her name tag read Simone Crawford. She approached Jerome, knelt down beside his seat. Mr. Washington, I'm so sorry for what happened. If you need anything during this flight, anything at all, please let me know. Thank you, Jerome said. I'm fine. Let's just get to San Francisco. But he wasn't fine. Not really. Because while Head won this battle, while Head used his power and connections to protect himself, he kept thinking about Nathaniel's words. This isn't the first time. How many other passengers had sat in these seats and been harassed, questioned, removed? How many didn't have a board chairman's phone number? How many suffered in silence because fighting back seemed impossible? The plane pushed back from the gate. Engines powered up. The cabin crew went through safety demonstrations. Everything proceeded normally now, as if the previous 30 minutes hadn't happened. As if discrimination could be erased by simply moving forward. But Jerome wasn't going to let it be erased. As the plane taxied toward the runway, as Atlanta fell away below them, he opened his laptop and began typing. An email to his legal team, another to his VP of Communications, a third to several journalists he knew. This story was going to be told. Not just his story, but all the stories of passengers who'd been treated as less than. Sky United Airlines was about to face a reckoning, and Jerome Washington was going to make sure it counted. The plane leveled off at 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign dimmed. Flight attendants began beverage service. Simone Crawford approached Jerome's row with a warm smile and a bottle of water shed already opened for him, a small gesture of care that stood in stark contrast to how He'd been treated 30 minutes earlier. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Washington? Coffee? Breakfast? Coffee would be great. Black? No sugar. Coming right up. Jerome watched her walk away, professional and kind, and wondered how many times she'd witnessed situations like his. How many times had she seen passengers profiled, questioned, harassed? Did she speak up? Could she speak up? Or did the culture of the airline make it impossible to challenge discrimination without risking her own job? His phone buzzed. A text from Gerald Whitmore. Call me when you land. We need to talk about what happens next. Another text, this one from his assistant. Twitter is blowing up. Video of the incident is viral. Press wants comment. Jerome opened Twitter. Sure enough, Martha Hendricks had uploaded her video before deleting it, but not before others had downloaded and reshared it. The clip showed him sitting calmly in seat 2A, Denise Harmon demanding he move, Brett Sullivan threatening to call security. The caption read, "Passenger refuses to cooperate with flight crew on Sky United flight," but the comments told a different story. This is clearly racial profiling. I fly first class all the time, and have never been asked to prove payment. Sky United needs to answer for this. That passenger handled it with so much grace. I would have lost it. The video had 60,000 views already, growing by the second. Other passengers on the flight had posted their own accounts. Someone had identified Jerome, linked to his Forbes profile, to Tech Vanguard's website. The narrative was building, and it wasn't the one Denise or Brett would have wanted. Jerome's phone buzzed again. This time, a call from an unknown number. He almost declined, then decided to answer. Jerome Washington. Mr. Washington. This is Alicia Torres, investigative reporter with the National Press. I've seen the video from your flight this morning. I'd like to interview you about what happened and about patterns of discrimination in the airline industry. Do you have time to talk? Not right now, Jerome said. I'm still on the flight, but it'll be available later today. Understood. Can I ask one question? In the video, you mentioned calling the board chairman. Is that accurate? Did you actually have a direct line to Sky United's leadership? Gerald Whitmore and I went to MIT together. He was an early investor in my company. Yes, I had his number. Yes, I called him. And within minutes, the captain was removed from command. That's correct. Mr. Washington, do you realize how unusual that is? How most passengers in your situation would have just been removed from the plane. Arrested, possibly. Banned from the airline? You had power most people don't have. Jerome looked out the window at the clouds passing below. I'm very aware. That's exactly why this story matters. I could defend myself, because I had connections. Most people can't. That's what needs to change. Would you be willing to help me investigate other incidents? I've been tracking airline discrimination cases for 2 years. There are patterns. If someone like you, with your visibility and resources, were willing to speak out, it could force real accountability. Send me what you have, Jerome said. I'll review it. Thank you, Mr. Washington. This conversation is off the record until you say otherwise. Appreciated. He hung up, made a note of Alicia Torres' name and number. Then he opened his laptop and continued the email he'd started during takeoff. It was addressed to his entire company, all 2,300 employees. This morning, I experienced racial discrimination on a flight to San Francisco. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but because it's a reminder that success doesn't insulate us from bias. It's a reminder that we must build systems, products, and cultures that treat everyone with dignity. Tech Vanguard has always been committed to diversity and inclusion. Today, that commitment became personal in a new way. When we land, I'll share more details. But I want you all to know, we're going to do something about this. He hit send. Within seconds, responses started flooding back. Support, anger, stories from employees who'd experienced similar treatment. The conversation was opening up, expanding beyond just his incident. Simone returned with his coffee. Here you go. And Mr. Washington, I just want to say, I've been a flight attendant for 18 years. What happened to you this morning, I've seen it happen too many times. To me, to other passengers. Thank you for not backing down. You've experienced this yourself, Jerome asked. She glanced around, making sure no one else was listening, then nodded. 3 years ago, I was flying as a passenger on my day off. Bought a first-class ticket with my employee discount. White passenger complained that I was making too much noise, which I wasn't. I was just existing. Flight attendant I'd worked with for years asked me to move to economy to avoid confrontation. I was in uniform. They knew I worked for the airline. Didn't matter. Did you report it? I did. Nothing happened. The passenger's complaint was taken seriously. Mine wasn't. That's when I learned how the system works. Power protects power. Maybe that's about to change, Jerome said. Simone smiled sadly. I hope so. But I've hoped before. She moved on to serve other passengers. Jerome sipped his coffee, thinking about her words. I've hoped before. How many people had hoped for change, for justice, for basic respect, only to be disappointed? How many had fought and lost, given up, accepted that this was just how things were? His phone rang. Gerald Whitmore. Jerry, what's happening? Barbara Keene just finished a conference call with the entire executive team, Gerald said. They're in crisis mode. The video is everywhere. Stock price is already dropping. They need to get ahead of this. What are they planning? Full investigation into discrimination complaints over the past 5 years. Independent audit. New training programs. They want to announce it today, with you standing beside Barbara at a press conference. Jerome laughed, no humor in it. They want me to help them save face. They want you to help them actually change. There's a difference. Is there? Or do they just want this to go away? Gerald was quiet for a moment. Jerome, you and I have known each other for 20 years. I've watched you build Tech Vanguard from nothing. I know how you think. You're not interested in performative gestures. You want systems to change. So do I. That's why I'm on this board. That's why I called Barbara the second you told me what was happening. You think she's serious about change. I think she's serious about not letting this company go down in flames. Whether that leads to real change or just better PR, that depends on people like you holding her accountable. Jerome considered this. If I do a press conference with her, I'm not reading a script. I'm going to say what needs to be said. I wouldn't expect anything less. And I want full access to the discrimination complaint data. All of it. Not sanitized. Not summarized. Raw data. I'll make sure you get it. One more thing. I want Nathaniel Hughes, the co-pilot who stood up for me, protected. I want him promoted. I want him visible in whatever diversity initiatives they're planning. Consider it done. They talked for a few more minutes, working out details. When Jerome hung up, he felt the weight of what he was stepping into. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about exposing a culture of discrimination, about forcing accountability, about using his platform to amplify voices that usually went unheard. The flight attendant, Brittany, who'd participated in questioning him earlier, approached his row nervously. "Mr. Washington, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up. I should have questioned what was happening. I didn't. And that makes me complicit. I'm sorry." Jerome looked at her. She was young, mid-20s, probably new to the job. She'd followed the lead of her supervisor, done what she was trained to do, which apparently included profiling passengers. "What's your last name?" he asked. "Collins. Brittany Collins." "Brittany, apologies are important. But what matters more is what you do next. If you see this happening again, to me or anyone else, what will you do?" She swallowed hard. "I'll speak up. I promise." "Good. Hold yourself to that promise." She nodded, eyes glistening, and walked away. Jerome turned back to his laptop. The press conference, with Barbara Keene, would be in a few hours. He needed to prepare his statement, decide what he wanted to say, how he wanted to frame this. But first, he needed to know just how deep this problem went. He opened a new email, addressed to Gerald and Barbara both. "Before I agree to any public appearance, I need full access to your complaint database. Every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years, with details on how each was resolved. I also want to speak with some of the passengers who filed those complaints. I want to hear their stories. If Sky United Airlines is serious about change, transparency is where it starts." He hit send, then leaned back in his seat. Outside the window, California approached. The Pacific Ocean glittered below. In a couple of hours, they'd land in San Francisco. Jerome would walk off this plane a different person than when he'd boarded. Not because he'd changed, but because the mask had been ripped off, revealing what he'd always known was there. The question now was whether anyone else was ready to see it. The plane descended through scattered clouds, San Francisco Bay spreading below like a sheet of hammered silver. Jerome watched the city approach, the towers of downtown, the arc of the Bay Bridge, the green hills of Marin beyond. He'd flown this route dozens of times, but today it felt different. Today, he was landing as someone who'd challenged a system and watched it crack open. His phone buzzed continuously. Emails, texts, social media notifications. The story had exploded beyond anything he'd anticipated. Major news outlets were covering it. Civil rights organizations were issuing statements. Even celebrities were weighing in, sharing their own experiences with airline discrimination. One text caught his attention. From his mother. "Baby, I saw what happened. Are you okay? I'm so proud of you for standing up. Call me when you can." He typed back, "I'm fine, Mom. We'll call tonight. Love you." The plane touched down. Smooth landing. Nathaniel Hughes' skill evident. As they taxied to the gate, Jerome received an email from Barbara Keene. Attached was a file labeled Confidential, Discrimination Complaints Analysis. The email read, "Mr. Washington, as requested. This data is deeply troubling. We owe you and many others a profound apology and real action. Press conference is scheduled for 5 p.m. Pacific at Sky United headquarters. Hope you'll join us." Jerome downloaded the file. 243 complaints over 5 years. He scrolled through, reading summaries. The patterns were undeniable. Shauna Pierce, black female physician, 41 years old, complained that when she identified herself as a doctor to help with a medical emergency on a flight, the flight attendant asked for proof of her medical license and questioned whether she was really qualified. White passengers who claimed to be doctors on previous flights had been taken at their word. Resolution. Apology letter sent. No disciplinary action. Terrence Boyd, black male professor, 38 years old, questioned about his first-class ticket, told he seemed too young to afford it, asked to provide credit card statement proving purchase. No other passengers asked for similar proof. Resolution. Complaint noted. No action taken. Marcus Chen, Asian American entrepreneur, 52 years old. Actually, wait, Jerome noticed this one was coded differently. Marcus had been upgraded to first class by the gate agent, due to overbooking in economy. When he took his seat, another passenger complained, saying those people were taking advantage of the system. Flight attendant moved Marcus back to economy to keep the peace, despite him having a valid first-class boarding pass. Resolution. Miles added to frequent flyer account. No policy change. On and on. 243 stories of humiliation, questioning, removal, discrimination. And, in almost every case, the resolution was minimal. An apology, some frequent flyer miles, maybe a voucher, but no systemic change, no accountability for the staff involved, no acknowledgement that the problem was the culture, not individual incidents. Jerome felt anger building, but also clarity. This was what Head suspected, what Head experienced himself in smaller ways throughout his life. But seeing it documented, seeing the scale of it, transformed suspicion into certainty. The plane reached the gate. Passengers stood, gathered belongings, filed toward the exit. Several stopped by Jerome's row. William Preston, the man who'd complained about delays, approached. "Mr. Washington, I owe you an apology. I didn't understand what was happening. I was focused on my schedule, not on what you were experiencing. That was wrong." Jerome looked at him. "Mr. Preston, I appreciate that. But understanding only matters if it changes how you act next time. If you see this happening to someone else, someone without my resources, will you speak up?" Preston hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I will." Martha Hendricks was next. "I deleted the video from my social media, but it's still out there. I'm sorry. I framed it wrong. I didn't see the discrimination clearly." "Why didn't you see it?" Jerome asked, genuinely curious. "Because it wasn't happening to me. Because I've never had to worry about being profiled. That's privilege, I guess. Not having to see things that don't affect you directly. At least you're seeing it now," Jerome said. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and moved on. Jerome was the last to exit. Nathaniel Hughes stood by the cockpit door, now officially the captain of this flight. They shook hands. "Thank you for trying to intervene," Jerome said. "I should have done more," Nathaniel replied. "I should have challenged Brett directly, in front of everyone. That could have ended your career. Maybe. But staying silent, that ends something else. Self-respect, integrity. I'm tired of calculating whether doing the right thing is safe." "Then let's make it safer," Jerome said. "Come with me to the press conference. Tell your story. Barbara Keene wants to promote you. Let's make sure she follows through." Nathaniel smiled. "I'll be there." Jerome walked through the jetway, into the terminal. A woman in a business suit approached immediately. "Mr. Washington? I'm Rachel Brennan, Vice President of Communications for Sky United Airlines. I'm here to escort you to headquarters for the press conference. We have a car waiting." "I have a press conference of my own scheduled," Jerome said, "for the Tech Vanguard merger announcement. We've coordinated with your team. They're moving it to tomorrow morning. Today needs to be about addressing what happened." Jerome followed her through the airport. They bypassed baggage claim, his luggage already collected by an assistant, and exited to a waiting SUV. The drive to Sky United headquarters took 20 minutes through San Francisco traffic. In the car, Rachel briefed him. "Barbara wants to make a joint statement. You'll speak first, share your experience. Then she'll announce the investigation, the policy changes, the commitment to doing better." "Who else is speaking?" Jerome asked. "Nathaniel Hughes, if he agrees. We'd also like to include several passengers who filed previous complaints. Show that this isn't just about you, it's about a pattern. Have you contacted those passengers?" "We're reaching out now." "Let me help with that," Jerome said, pulling out his phone. "I want to make sure they're not pressured, that they feel safe speaking up." Rachel looked surprised. "Of course. We want this to be genuine." Over the next 20 minutes, Jerome called 3 passengers from the complaint file. Shauna Pierce, the physician; Terrence Boyd, the professor; a woman named Keisha Franklin who'd been removed from a flight 2 years ago for suspicious behavior that turned out to be nothing more than speaking on the phone in a foreign language. All 3 agreed to attend the press conference. All 3 had stories that needed to be heard. When they arrived at Sky United headquarters, Barbara Keene was waiting in the lobby. She was in her 50s, sharp-featured, expensively dressed, with the bearing of someone used to command. But when she saw Jerome, her expression softened into something like genuine remorse. "Mr. Washington, thank you for coming. I know you have every reason to want nothing to do with this company. The fact that you're here, willing to help us improve, says a lot about your character." "I'm not here for you," Jerome said bluntly. "I'm here for every passenger who was treated the way I was and didn't have a phone number to call. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again." "Understood. And I respect that." She led him to a conference room where the other speakers were gathering. Shauna Pierce, elegant and poised, introduced herself. Terrence Boyd, passionate and articulate, shook Jerome's hand firmly. Keisha Franklin, quietly powerful, nodded her acknowledgement. Nathaniel Hughes arrived last, still in his pilot uniform. When Barbara saw him, she stood. "Captain Hughes, thank you for being here. I want you to know that your conduct today, standing up for what's right even when it put you at odds with your superior, that's exactly the kind of leadership this company needs." "Thank you, ma'am," Nathaniel said, "though I wish he had done more sooner." Barbara addressed the room. "In 30 minutes, we're going to face the media. This will be the most important press conference Sky United Airlines has ever held. We're not here to make excuses. We're here to acknowledge failure and commit to change. Mr. Washington, you'll speak first. Tell your story, exactly as it happened. Then Shauna, Terrence, and Keisha will share their experiences. I'll conclude with our action plan." "What about Denise Harmon and Brett Sullivan?" Jerome asked. What's happening to them? Barbara's face hardened. Both have been terminated. Their employment with Sky United Airlines ended 1 hour ago. We've also begun reviewing every flight they've worked in the past 2 years, identifying other potential incidents. Will they face legal consequences? Shauna asked. That depends on what our investigation reveals. If we find evidence of systematic discrimination, criminal patterns, we'll refer to appropriate authorities. The room fell silent. This was real. Careers were ending. A company was being forced to confront its failures publicly. The question was whether it would lead to actual change or just better crisis management. Rachel Brennan entered. We're ready? Media is assembled. This will be broadcast live. They walked together to the auditorium. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the seats. The energy was intense, expectant. This was a story that had captured national attention, and everyone wanted to see how it would unfold. Barbara took the podium first. Thank you all for coming. Today, Sky United Airlines faces a moment of reckoning. This morning, one of our passengers, Mr. Jerome Washington, experienced racial discrimination on one of our flights. This is unacceptable. But as we've investigated further, we've discovered this was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. Today, we're here to acknowledge that failure, apologize to those we've harmed, and commit to doing better. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Washington. Jerome stepped to the podium. Cameras focused on him. He looked out at the assembled media, at the faces watching intently, and began to speak.
My name is Jerome Washington. I'm the CEO of Tech Vanguard.
This morning, I boarded a flight from Atlanta to San Francisco. I had a first-class ticket, purchased by my company, confirmed and valid. Within minutes of sitting down, I was questioned about my ticket's legitimacy. I was asked to provide proof of payment. I was told I might be using a fraudulent boarding pass. When I refused to move from my assigned seat, I was threatened with arrest. Why? Because I'm black, and the flight attendants couldn't believe a black man belonged in first class. He paused. Let that sink in. I was able to defend myself because I had connections. I called someone powerful. Within minutes, everything changed. The captain who had threatened me was suspended. The flight attendant who'd questioned me was removed. But here's what keeps me up at night. What about everyone else? What about the passengers who don't have a board chairman's phone number? What about the people who are removed from flights, arrested, banned, humiliated, and have no recourse? Today isn't just about me, it's about them. He gestured to the others on the stage. Shauna Pierce is a physician who was questioned about her qualifications when she tried to help during a medical emergency. Terrence Boyd is a professor who was told he looked too young to afford first class. Keisha Franklin was removed from a flight for speaking Swahili on the phone, deemed suspicious for using her native language. These are just 3 stories. There are 240 more in Sky United's complaint files from the past 5 years alone. And those are just the people who bothered to complain. Jerome's voice grew stronger, more forceful. This is about systemic racism in the airline industry and beyond. It's about assumptions that black and brown people don't belong in certain spaces. It's about power, protecting power. It's about a culture that values comfort over justice. Today, Sky United Airlines has a chance to change, not just to apologize, but to transform how they operate. I'm here to make sure they follow through. The room erupted with questions, cameras flashing, but Jerome stepped back. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about amplifying the voices that usually went unheard. The press conference lasted 2 hours. After Jerome spoke, Shauna Pierce described being questioned about her medical credentials in front of a plane full of passengers while someone was having a cardiac event. Her voice cracked as she talked about the humiliation, the way other passengers looked at her with suspicion, the precious minutes lost while she argued with a flight attendant who couldn't believe a black woman could be a doctor. Terrence Boyd spoke about the assumption that young black professionals couldn't afford first class, the way wealth and success were automatically questioned when they didn't come in the expected package. Had published 3 books, won a National Book Award, taught at Princeton. None of that mattered when he tried to sit in seat 3F on a Tuesday afternoon flight to Chicago. Keisha Franklin, speaking publicly for the first time about her experience, described being removed from a plane by armed security officers because she'd been speaking Swahili to her mother, who was sick in Kenya. Other passengers reported her as suspicious. The flight attendant called security without even asking her what language she was speaking. She'd missed her connection, missed seeing her mother before she died. All because someone decided a black woman speaking a foreign language was a threat. By the time Barbara Keene took the podium again, tears were streaming down faces in the audience. The weight of these stories, the accumulated pain of discrimination, filled the room like smoke. Barbara's statement was comprehensive. Immediate termination of Brett Sullivan and Denise Harmon. Full investigation into all discrimination complaints from the past 5 years. Independent audit by a civil rights organization. Mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, from baggage handlers to executives. Creation of a passenger advocacy office with direct reporting to the CEO. Compensation for every passenger who'd filed a discrimination complaint that wasn't adequately resolved. This will cost us, Barbara said. Financially, reputationally, perhaps legally. But the cost of doing nothing would be higher. We've failed our passengers. We've failed our employees of color who've had to work in an environment that tolerated discrimination. We've failed the values we claim to uphold. Starting today, that changes. Questions from reporters came fast and sharp. Miss Keene. Some are saying this is just damage control. That you're only acting because Jerome Washington had powerful connections. What do you say to that? Barbara didn't flinch. They're right to be skeptical. We should have acted long before today. The fact that it took someone with Mr. Washington's resources and connections to force accountability is damning. That's exactly what we need to fix. No passenger should need to be a CEO to be treated with dignity. Will you compensate Mr. Washington specifically? I've offered. Hess declined. Hess asked instead that resources go toward establishing a fund for passengers who've experienced discrimination on any airline, not just ours. That was news to the reporters. And to Jerome, who looked at Barbara with surprise. She met his eyes, nodded slightly. She'd understood what he wanted. Not personal compensation, but systemic change. Mr. Washington. A reporter called out. What do you want to see happen beyond Sky United? Do you think this problem extends to other airlines? Jerome returned to the podium. Of course it does. Sky United isn't unique. They're just the ones who got caught this time. American Airlines, United, Delta, Southwest. Every carrier has similar complaints. The FAA should mandate reporting of discrimination incidents. The Department of Transportation should investigate patterns. Airlines should be required to publish their complaint data publicly. Transparency creates accountability. Are you planning legal action? I'm considering all options. But my primary focus is on making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. The press conference ended with Barbara announcing that Jerome would serve as an advisor to Sky United's diversity and inclusion efforts, and that Nathaniel Hughes would be promoted to Director of Pilot Training, with a mandate to increase diversity in the cockpit. As cameras packed up and reporters filed out, Alicia Torres, the investigative journalist Jerome had spoken with on the plane, approached. Mr. Washington, I've been digging into airline discrimination for 2 years. What you've done today, forcing this into the open, It's unprecedented. But I need you to understand how deep this goes. She handed him a folder. I've documented over 800 incidents across all major U.S. carriers in the past 3 years. Flight attendants removing passengers for speaking foreign languages. Black passengers moved away from white passengers who complained. Muslim passengers subjected to extra screening. Disabled passengers denied boarding. The patterns are clear. And almost none of it gets reported publicly because airlines settle quietly, require non-disclosure agreements, intimidate passengers into silence. Jerome flipped through the folder. The evidence was overwhelming. Stories that matched his own. Stories worse than his. A steady drumbeat of discrimination that had been happening while most of the flying public remained oblivious. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Help me get this story in front of Congress. Help me push for federal legislation. Use your platform. Because Sky United fixing their problems is great, but it's not enough. The entire industry needs to change." "I'm in," Jerome said. "Let's write this story together." Over the next few hours, as late afternoon turned to evening, the impact of the press conference rippled outward. Other passengers who'd experienced discrimination started coming forward, encouraged by Jerome's willingness to speak out. Social media filled with stories. The hashtag, Respect in the Skies, trended nationally. Brett Sullivan and Denise Harmon became symbols of systemic racism. Their names were searched online, their histories examined. It emerged that Brett had multiple complaints in his file that had never resulted in discipline. Denise had been reported 17 times for targeting passengers of color. Yet both had been protected, their careers allowed to continue, because the culture of the airline prioritized loyalty to employees over justice for passengers. Now that protection was gone, Brett's pilot license was under review by the FAA. Denise was blacklisted from the entire airline industry. Their careers, built over decades, collapsed in a single day. Some sympathized, arguing they were scapegoats for a larger problem. Others said they'd had countless opportunities to change and hadn't. Jerome understood both perspectives. Yes, they were products of a system, but they'd also made choices, day after day, to treat passengers with suspicion and contempt based on nothing but skin color. By evening, Jerome finally made it to his San Francisco office. His team greeted him with applause. The merger press conference had been moved to the next morning, but nobody cared. What Jerome had done was bigger than any business deal. His VP of Communications approached. "Jerome, we're getting requests from everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times, The Washington Post, 60 Minutes. Everyone wants to interview you. Schedule them," Jerome said. "All of them. This story needs to be told as widely as possible." He went to his office, closed the door, and called his mother. "Baby, I've been watching everything on TV. Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Mom. Tired, but okay. You made me so proud today. Standing up like that, not backing down. That took courage. You gave me that courage, Mom. Everything you went through, everything you sacrificed to give me opportunities, that's what made today possible." His mother was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your father would have been proud too." Jerome's father had died when he was 12. Heart attack, stress-related, working 2 jobs to support the family. One of the millions of black men ground down by a system that demanded everything and gave back so little. "I know, Mom. I'm doing this for him too. For every black person who's been told they don't belong, who's been questioned, doubted, dismissed. I'm doing it for all of us." They talked for a while longer, and when he hung up, Jerome felt the exhaustion hit. It had been the longest day of his life, from a routine flight that turned into a confrontation, to a press conference that exposed systemic discrimination, to this moment sitting in his office knowing that everything had changed. His phone buzzed, a text from Nathaniel Hughes. "Thank you for today. for giving me a chance to speak up, for making it safer to do the right thing." Jerome typed back, "Thank you for being the one person on that plane who tried to help. Don't let them silence you." "I won't. Promise." Jerome leaned back in his chair, looked out at the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere out there, people were boarding planes right now. Some of them were being treated with respect. Some of them weren't. The question was whether today's events would change that balance, whether the light shining on this problem would force real transformation or just temporary improvements until the attention faded. He didn't know yet, but he was going to make sure the attention didn't fade. This was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, the full scope of the fallout became clear. Sky United Airlines stock had dropped 15% in the immediate aftermath of the press conference, costing the company nearly $2 billion in market value. But something unexpected happened. After the initial drop, the stock began recovering as investors saw the company taking concrete action rather than hiding behind lawyers and PR spin. Barbara Keene had kept her promises. The independent audit revealed exactly what Jerome had suspected: 243 official complaints over 5 years. But investigation showed the real number was much higher. Many passengers never filed formal complaints because they didn't know how, didn't think it would matter, or were too exhausted by the experience to fight. The audit also revealed something more disturbing: a pattern of flight attendants and pilots who repeatedly targeted passengers of color. Denise Harmon wasn't an outlier. She was part of a network, a culture where certain employees felt empowered to question, harass, and remove passengers based on racial profiling. Brett Sullivan's case was particularly damning. In his 28 years with Sky United, had been involved in 17 incidents where passengers of color were removed from his flights. 17 times Head determined that a passenger was disruptive, suspicious, or inappropriate. 17 times, those passengers happened to be Black, Latino, Asian, or Middle Eastern. The statistical probability of that being coincidence was effectively zero. Both Brett and Denise lawyered up immediately, threatened lawsuits for wrongful termination, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their lawyers quietly advised them to settle, take whatever severance Sky United offered, and disappear. Brett's pilot license was suspended by the FAA pending investigation. Without it, he couldn't fly commercially. At 51 years old, with his reputation destroyed, he had no path back to aviation. He took a job managing a sporting goods store in Atlanta, making a fraction of his former pilot's salary. His wife left him. His adult children struggled to reconcile the father they thought they knew with the man revealed in investigation reports. Denise Harmon fared even worse. Her flight attendant license was permanently revoked. At 58, she had few employment options. No airline would touch her. She filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. The woman who'd wielded power so casually over passengers, who'd made judgments about who belonged and who didn't, discovered what it felt like to be powerless herself. Some argued they were being scapegoated, that they were products of a system and shouldn't bear all the blame. Jerome listened to those arguments but didn't find them persuasive. Yes, they were products of a system, but they'd also had choices. They'd had 17 incidents, multiple complaints, countless opportunities to examine their behavior and change. They'd chosen not to. The other passengers from first class that day also faced consequences. William Preston, the man who'd complained about delays, found his comments during the incident widely circulated. His real estate company lost several major clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who'd publicly supported racial profiling. He issued an apology, donated to civil rights organizations, and began diversity training at his company. Whether it was genuine transformation or damage control, time would tell. Martha Hendricks, the lawyer who'd recorded the incident, and initially framed it as a disruptive passenger issue, faced professional sanctions. The State Bar Association investigated her conduct. She was reprimanded for racial bias, required to complete ethics training. Her law firm asked her to take a leave of absence. Her career survived, but barely. Meanwhile, the passengers who'd suffered discrimination were finally getting justice. Sky United established a $75 million compensation fund. Shauna Pierce received $200,000 for the humiliation of being questioned about her medical credentials. Terrence Boyd received $150,000. Keisha Franklin, who'd been removed from a flight and missed saying goodbye to her dying mother, received $500,000. But it wasn't just about money. Jerome had pushed for systemic changes, and Sky United delivered. A new passenger Bill of Rights was established. Clear protocols for when and how passengers could be questioned or removed. Independent review of every removal decision. A passenger advocate office with real power to investigate complaints and override airline decisions. Nathaniel Hughes, now Director of Pilot Training, implemented new programs to increase diversity in the cockpit. He created mentorship programs for pilots of color, partnered with historically black colleges to create aviation programs, and established zero-tolerance policies for discrimination. The ripple effects extended beyond Sky United. Other airlines, watching the public relations disaster and financial consequences, began examining their own policies. Delta announced a comprehensive review of discrimination complaints. United created a diversity task force. American Airlines hired a chief inclusion officer with authority to implement changes across the company. Congress took notice. Senator Patricia Coleman, chair of the Commerce Committee, announced hearings on discrimination in the airline industry. Jerome was invited to testify. So were Shauna, Terrence, and Keisha. Alicia Torres, the investigative journalist, presented her research on the 800 documented incidents across all major carriers. The hearings were brutal for airline executives. CEO after CEO was forced to admit they'd known about discrimination complaints and had done little to address them. The statistics were damning. Black passengers were 3 times more likely to be removed from flights than white passengers. Muslim passengers were 5 times more likely to face additional screening. Disabled passengers were routinely denied boarding. Legislation was introduced. The Air Travel Fairness Act required airlines to publicly report discrimination complaints quarterly. It mandated independent investigations of patterns. It created federal penalties for airlines that failed to address systematic discrimination. It gave passengers legal standing to sue for discriminatory treatment without being forced into arbitration. The bill passed with bipartisan support. 6 months after Jerome Washington sat in seat 2A and refused to move, the entire airline industry had been transformed. But for all the policy changes and legal victories, Jerome kept thinking about the individual stories. The passengers who'd been humiliated, questioned, removed. The dignity stolen from them in moments that seemed small to everyone else, but were crushing to those who experienced them. He thought about his mother, about the times she'd been followed in stores, questioned about her ability to pay, treated as suspicious simply for existing while black. About his father, who'd worked himself to death, trying to prove he was worthy of respect. About every black person who'd learned to make themselves smaller, quieter, less threatening just to move through spaces that should have been open to everyone. This fight wasn't just about airplanes. It was about all the spaces where power decided who belonged and who didn't. It was about changing those power structures, dismantling the assumptions that let discrimination flourish. 3 months after the incident, Jerome received a letter. No return address, handwritten. Mr. Washington, you don't know me. I'm a flight attendant for Sky United, have been for 12 years. I'm white. I watched what happened to you on that flight through the reports and investigations. I want you to know that I've been complicit in this system. I've watched passengers of color be questioned and removed. I've stayed silent because speaking up seemed risky, because I valued my job more than justice. Your courage forced me to examine my own actions. I've committed to speaking up from now on. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like. I'm sorry it took your pain to wake me up. The letter wasn't signed. Jerome read it twice, then filed it away. He hoped the flight attendant who wrote it would keep that commitment. He hoped there were others like her, people who'd witnessed discrimination and were now finding the courage to challenge it. But he also knew hope wasn't enough. Systems didn't change because people hoped. They changed because people demanded it, fought for it, refused to accept anything less. That's what today had been about. Not just one CEO fighting back against one incident, but the beginning of a movement to transform an entire industry. 6 months after Jerome Washington refused to leave Seat 2A, he found himself back on a Sky United Airlines flight, Atlanta to San Francisco, first class, same route, Seat 2A. The symmetry wasn't accidental. Had chosen this flight deliberately, wanted to see what had changed. The check-in process was smooth. The gate agent, a young black woman named Jasmine Harris, recognized him immediately. Her smile was genuine. "Mr. Washington, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you flying with us today." No double-checking of his ticket, no suspicious glances, just professional courtesy. Jerome boarded the plane. The cabin looked the same. Leather seats, soft lighting, the familiar smell of filtered air. But something felt different. The energy had shifted. The lead flight attendant approached. Simone Crawford, the same woman who'd served him coffee on that fateful flight 6 months ago. She smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Mr. Washington. It's good to see you again." "Good to see you too, Simone. How have things been?" She glanced around, lowered her voice slightly. "Different. Better. The training programs, the new policies, people are actually following them. There's accountability now. If someone profiles a passenger, they're disciplined immediately. It's not perfect, but it's night and day compared to before." "That's good to hear. Thank you," Simone said, "for what you did, for forcing change. It made my job better too. I don't have to stay silent anymore when I see something wrong." She moved on to greet other passengers. Jerome settled into his seat, opened his laptop. He had work to do, a board meeting to prepare for. But first he pulled up an email from Alicia Torres. "Jerome, final draft of the investigative piece attached. 3-part series for the Times. It's going to run next week. Thank you for everything you've contributed. This story wouldn't have been possible without your willingness to speak out." Jerome opened the attachment, skimmed the article. It was comprehensive. 800 incidents documented across all major U.S. carriers. Interviews with dozens of passengers who'd experienced discrimination. Statistical analysis showing clear patterns of racial profiling. And, most importantly, documentation of the changes that had followed. The Air Travel Fairness Act. The industry-wide policy reforms. The $200 million in compensation paid to affected passengers. But the article also made clear that the work wasn't finished. Discrimination still happened. Biases still existed. Changing policies was one thing. Changing hearts and minds was harder. The plane filled with passengers. Jerome noticed the diversity in first class. A young black couple in their 20s, probably celebrating something special. A Latina businesswoman typing urgently on her phone. An elderly Asian man reading a newspaper. A Middle Eastern family with 2 small children. 6 months ago, any of them might have been questioned, doubted, asked to prove they belonged. Today, they boarded without incident. Not because discrimination had been eliminated, but because systems were in place to catch and prevent it. The cockpit door opened. Nathaniel Hughes emerged, now wearing a captain's uniform, 4 stripes on his shoulders. He walked down the aisle, greeting passengers, and stopped at Jerome's row. Good morning, Mr. Washington. I'll be your captain today. They shook hands. Nathaniel leaned in, spoke quietly. I've trained 47 new pilots in the past 6 months. 15 of them are people of color. That's more diversity than we've had in the past 5 years combined. This is happening because of what you started. It's happening because you're doing the work, Jerome replied. I just opened the door. You're the one walking through it. Nathaniel smiled. We're walking through it together. The flight departed on time. As Atlanta fell away below, Jerome thought about the journey of the past 6 months. The press conferences, the congressional testimony, the interviews, the meetings with airline executives and civil rights organizations, the exhaustion of reliving his story over and over. The weight of being a symbol, a representative of something larger than himself. But also, the victories. The passengers who'd contacted him to say they'd spoken up when they saw discrimination because his example gave them courage. The young black professionals who told him they flew with more confidence now, knowing there were protections in place. The flight attendants of color who said they felt safer doing their jobs. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Baby, I'm flying to Chicago to visit your sister. First time I've flown in years. I'm nervous but also excited. Thank you for making the skies a little safer for people like me. Jerome typed back, have a wonderful flight, Mom. Text me when you land. Love you. He looked out the window at the clouds passing below, at the vast sky stretching in every direction. Flying had always been about freedom, about transcending boundaries, about reaching places that seemed impossible. But that freedom had never been equally distributed. Some people had to fight for their right to occupy space, to be believed, to be treated with dignity. The fight wasn't over. Jerome knew that. Discrimination didn't disappear because of one incident, one press conference, one law. It was embedded in culture, in assumptions, in the small everyday moments where power decided who mattered and who didn't. But today, on this flight, in this cabin, change was visible, tangible, real. Simone returned with coffee, black, no sugar, exactly how Jerome liked it. Can I get you anything else? I'm good, thank you. She started to walk away, then paused. Mr. Washington, I have a daughter. She's 19, studying aviation at Embry-Riddle. She wants to be a pilot. 6 months ago, I would have told her it was too hard, that the industry wasn't ready for black women in the cockpit. Now, I tell her to go for it, because people like you and Captain Hughes are changing what's possible. Jerome felt emotion tighten his throat. What's your daughter's name? Aria. Tell Aria that I look forward to flying on one of her flights someday. Simona's eyes glistened. I will. The flight continued smoothly. 3 hours of work, of preparation, of thinking about the future. Tech Vanguard was thriving. The merger had been successful. The company's AI technology was saving lives, detecting diseases earlier, giving patients hope. Jerome's professional life had never been stronger, but his purpose had expanded. Had always been committed to building a successful company, to creating jobs, to innovating. Now he understood that his success gave him a responsibility to fight for systemic change, to use his platform for justice, to speak up for people who couldn't speak for themselves. As the plane descended into San Francisco, Jerome received an email from Barbara Keene. Jerome, wanted to update you on our progress. Discrimination complaints are down 67% compared to last year. Employee satisfaction scores are up, especially among our staff of color. Passenger satisfaction in the highest it's been in a decade. Change is working. Thank you for pushing us to do better. The plane landed. Smooth touchdown. As Jerome gathered his belongings, he felt a tap on his shoulder. The young black man from row 3 stood behind him. Excuse me, Mr. Washington. I just wanted to say thank you. I fly every week for work. Before what you did, I dreaded it. Dreaded the looks, the questions, the feeling of not belonging. It's better now. Not perfect, but better. You gave us that. Jerome shook his hand. Keep speaking up if you see problems. That's how we make sure it stays better. I will. I promise. Jerome exited the plane, walked through the jetway, into the terminal. His assistant was waiting with his schedule for the day. Meetings, interviews, decisions to make. But first, one more thing. He pulled out his phone, opened Twitter, and typed a message. Just completed a flight on Sky United Airlines. Same route where this journey began 6 months ago. Today, it was uneventful in the best possible way. No questions, no suspicion, just professional service. That's what change looks like. Not dramatic, just decent. We're not done fighting, but we're making progress. To everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong, you belong. Keep fighting. Keep demanding dignity. It's working. He hit send, then looked up. Ahead of him, the airport stretched out. Thousands of people moving through this space, flying to meetings, to vacations, to funerals, to celebrations. Each of them with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments where they'd either been treated with dignity or denied it. The work would never be finished. There would always be more battles to fight, more systems to change, more people who needed someone to stand up for them. But today, in this moment, Jerome Washington allowed himself to feel something that had been elusive for so long. Hope. Not naive hope that everything would magically get better, but earned hope based on concrete change. Hope built on the foundation of people refusing to accept injustice, demanding better, and not backing down when told to be quiet. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Gerald Whitmore. Proud of you, Jerry. What you've accomplished goes far beyond one airline. You've started a movement. Don't stop now. Jerome smiled, pocketed his phone, and walked forward into the terminal. Into whatever came next, ready to keep fighting, ready to keep building, ready to make sure that the next person who sat in seat 2A, or any seat on any plane, would be treated with the dignity every human being deserved. The story had started with one man refusing to move. It would continue with millions refusing to accept a world that treated them as less than. And maybe, just maybe, that was how change really happened. One person at a time, one moment at a time, one refusal at a time. The skies were a little more equal today than they'd been 6 months ago. Tomorrow, they'd be even better, because Jerome Washington and thousands like him would make sure of it. So here's my question for you. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination on a plane? Would you speak up? Would you record it? Would you intervene? Comment below and let me know. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about power, privilege, and justice, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss future stories about people who refuse to accept injustice. Because these stories matter. They remind us that change is possible when we demand it, when we refuse to stay silent, when we use whatever power we have to make the world a little more fair. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, the next time you see someone being treated unfairly, you have a choice. You can look away, or you can be the person who speaks up. Choose wisely. Until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for what's right. This story teaches us that silence enables injustice. When Jerome refused to move from seat 2A, he didn't just defend himself. He defended everyone who'd been profiled before him and everyone who would come after. The lesson here is powerful. Systems change when people with power use it responsibly. Jerome had connections, resources, and a platform. He could have accepted an apology and moved on. Instead, He demanded accountability that helped thousands of passengers' head never meet. But there's a deeper truth here. Change shouldn't require extraordinary circumstances. Regular passengers without CEO titles or board chairman phone numbers deserve the same dignity Jerome fought for. That's why his story matters beyond the individual victory. It exposed how discrimination becomes normalized when institutions prioritize employee loyalty over passenger rights. When complaints disappear into databases without consequences, when bias hides behind claims of security protocols. The story also reveals that transformation happens in layers. Policy changes came first, mandated training and oversight. But real change required cultural shifts. Individuals like Nathaniel Hughes and Simone Crawford finding courage to speak up. Passengers like those on that flight examining their own complicity. Justice isn't a single moment. It's sustained effort by people who refuse to accept inequality as inevitable. Jerome's refusal to move wasn't just about a seat. It was about refusing to accept a world where some people are presumed to belong and others must constantly prove their worth. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed discrimination while traveling? Did you speak up or stay silent? What would you do if you were in Jerome's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories about people standing up against injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's experienced discrimination, or someone who needs to understand why these stories matter. Thank you for watching, for listening, for caring enough to engage with difficult truths. Remember, change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal. You have more power than you think. Use it wisely. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, keep demanding dignity for everyone, and never stop believing that a better world is possible. Stay blessed, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.